And welcome to Magic Without Fears 2021 first roundtable, our esoteric roundtable. Welcome, thanks all for being here. That is the end of my formal introduction because, as you know from the podcast, as Zemmi does know and Celeste knows very well, formality is not what I'm aiming at in my presentations to a culture. So be as chill as you want, have a drink, have a smoke, do astral evocations as you wish. But yeah, no, it's great to be talking with awesome scholars and magicians like you. And we're going to talk about some things like that magicians don't always talk about. We discussed some things like aliens and entheogens, and not often. Actually, I think the alien thing is an interesting one because magicians don't often or always comment on that thing. So we're going to touch on that and everything else in our domains. And do you guys want to start off by just going around and telling our viewers who you are and a little bit about your background and practices? How about Jack?
Sure. That sounds great. I'll go first. Thank you for letting me be on the round table. It's great to meet you, RC. My name is Jack Grayle. I write and I do ritual work. I wrote a book called The Hecatian. I'm a devotee of Hecate. I teach courses on the Greek magical papyri and on Hecatian magic with the Blackthorn School. I have a second edition of my book, should be coming out soon. I'm also going to be teaching 2 new classes this year, one on the Iliad and the Odyssey, and also a class on my own book that'll be coming out in a month or 2. So I was really pleased to be invited on the show, and I'm glad to be here with you all. Thank you.
All right, Reverend Zemmi, who art thou?
All right, hello. I am Reverend Zemaemidjehuty. I'm the founder of the Church of Flesh and Feather. I have 2 books available with Thean Publishing. The Book of Flesh and Feather, and then the Litanies of Thoth is currently open for pre-order. I teach a class with Blackthorn School as well on ancient Egyptian magic. I just kind of almost do whatever I want and make it happen. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Celeste?
Hi, what's up? I am never sure how to introduce myself on these things. I don't have a book on magic out, but Wiser, hit me up if you want to hear me rant about things in print. I'm available. But I do have I'm a poet as well as a occultist and magician. So I have a short poetry book out through Porkbelly Press that you can order. It's called Lucid, a micro memoir, and it touches on lucid dreaming and tulpas and tulpamancy. Tulpas is kind of the thing, I think, that I've started to get asked to talk about a whole bunch. So that sort of seems to be currently my niche. Podcasts are asking me to come on and rant into the abyss about thought forms and tulpas and egregores. So that's sort of a line of fascination at the moment. But I'm kind of all over the place. I took Jack's course last summer, which I loved. And I'm just, in a state of constant expansion. But I'm on Instagram. That's where I do most of my rantings. You can find me on the gram at Celeste Mott.
Awesome. Samuel David, it's exciting to see you after just listening to your Glitch Bottle podcast on Patreon just today. So tell us about yourself. Yeah, cheers, brother.
Well, I have a book, an upcoming book with Anathema Publishing called Rod and Ring, an initiation into an esoteric Mesopotamian tradition. That's not the exact title. I can't think of the title right now because I feel like I'm in front of a classroom, a classroom of total strangers. So let me get back on track here. I am a Mesopotamian polytheist, an insufferable academic, which has been an insult hurled at me, and I wear with pride and honor.
Yeah, man. How else can it be done?
How else can it be done exactly?
That sort of actually is a nice lead into our first of our highly structured formal roundtable that will not violate any liminal breaches or transgressions in any way. That doesn't really make sense, but whatever. What was I going to say? I'm not even stoned yet. We're here. We're off to a great start.
Not yet.
what was it you mentioned about anyway? Oh, that leads us into the topic. Dion Fortune, who we all know and love, right? She famously said, slightly ironically, that there's no room for authority in occultism. And I think it's a statement that needs no explanation, but a lot could be said about it. And it seems to be quite a hot topic these days, the issues of titles, you know, and leadership, gurus, solipsism, narcissism, all these sort of issues that come with all of it. And so let's talk about that, because I mean, I was 21, 22 when I was in the Golden Dawn, and had on my shoulders the responsibility of sometimes expelling people, even if they were 30, 40, 50, 60. And I was like 21-year-old punk having to expel someone from a group they'd been in for years. That was weird. That was a weird experience to be in, but like, you have no choice. Like you have to do that sometimes, especially under certain circumstances.
I'm curious as to why. Why do people get thrown? Why would you have thrown people out occasionally?
Yeah, what did they do?
Say a frater, a brother, you know, grabbing a girl's ass in the hallway outside the temple in between classes, and when asked about it, said I could tell she wanted it. There's an example of especially if that person's had multiple warnings or infractions such as that'll be one. That was an interesting case. That person didn't actually get expelled because they paid some money to someone else, and that was a bad thing. But that was the end times of my involvement there. Towards the end, I did my best to keep Temple Jehuty alive and well. I'm very proud to be a Tehutian. Actually got my little Jehuty up there. See, Reverend?
I do. I'm in front of the shrine of flesh and feather.
You've got the full meal deal. But yeah, that's an example of issues of authority, and it's something I was fascinated by all the learning I got in mainstream seminary about how churches deal with this stuff. It's a lot. There's a lot to it, but I'm very, very curious about all of your thoughts and perspectives on any aspect of that as leaders of groups, as leaders of thought, and as teachers. It's something, the issue of authority and occultism, or at least perceived authority and everything that comes with it, is inescapable. So if anyone has a thought, speak up. We can go around the table or random rapid fire.
I guess it would depend on how you define the occult. I mean, Sam, Jack, and I come from praxis that was full of priests and teachers, people who very much held the information sort of over other people. Then, of course, the divine is also an authority as well. I would say that is not true. Authority is very necessary in the occult in that way.
Interesting.
I'll add something that I think provides context too. I understand where the statement comes from, because everything about this work is internal, personalized, individual, and it's deeply personal. One's apprehension of the divine or the unseen world and our ability to connect with it. So the last thing people need, if they think they're succeeding, is someone saying to them, "You're doing it wrong," like a Slate article, you know, or "You're the wrong gender for that," or "Well, you're not born there," or, you know, "You didn't take my class, therefore you can't be having the results you're claiming." That's the kind of thing that gives authority in the occult a bad name. People who discount other people's genuine spiritual experiences and successes by undercutting them and reducing their confidence to where they feel like they can't have a legitimate spiritual experience unless this person give them permission to have it, right? So that, I think, is the basis for statements like that. When you're not dealing with a formal organization, obviously, if you're dealing with a formal, you know, fraternal magical organization, or a formal priesthood, or a formal coven even, then there's going to be a hierarchy, whether it's attenuated or flat, you know. But I do understand the impulse of saying no one has a right to tell you you're doing it wrong when it comes to this sort of stuff, which is often very personalized esoteric work. However, I will say too, the opposite is true. If you find a good mentor who validates your experience and says, no, you're on the right track. No, that what you think was a failure was a success. No, you don't understand. You can't see the forest for the trees. You're doing better than you know. You have more aptitude for this than you think. You just need to, expand your expectations or look at it from a different angle. The right person can really be empowering for people who are insecure about their own abilities or who feel like I'm not magical enough to be part of this world, or I'm not like the kid in Sixth Sense, so I can't do spirit work or whatever. A good teacher ideally validates the skills you already have and provides you with context and a perspective that helps you, continue on the path you're going and be more confident and be more successful. So the real question is, when we talk about leaders, presumably we're talking about teachers or gurus or mentors or priests or high priestesses or, the whatever. Do they empower and validate and improve the lives of the people who give them their time and sometimes money? Or do they increase those people's dependence by deepening their insecurities, by making them trust themselves less? And I think you can almost draw a line and divide them into two groups. Do the people that increase your own, ability to trust in your intuition and your expectation so you feel empowered and confident? Or do they reduce your sense of what you can do and what you can see so that you're entirely reliant on their permission to participate in this world? And that's, I think, the flip side of the coin for me.
That was awesome, Jack. That was eloquent, man. That was great. Any other? Samuel, what do you think?
Exactly what Jack said. He stole the words right out of my mouth.
Could anyone disagree with what Jack said?
No.
I'm sure someone will, and they'll write a heated think piece on a well-known blog that we won't discuss, we won't mention by name.
Jack's got his hand up. What's he gonna say?
Build on what I say too is what I just said applies across the board, not just in occultism. You know what I mean? I came from an arts background in college, and anyone who's been part of that world knows there's two sorts of teachers. The ones who encourage you and, they might correct you, but they say, no, your eye is good. Your hand is better than you think. Your impulse is valid. You're not trusting yourself enough. Go further with this. Trust yourself. And whether you're a graphic artist or a performance artist or a musician, that increases your own confidence, your own ability. That's the kind of mentor everyone needs as an artist. But there's another type of teacher that when you do your best, they undercut you and they say, you must have known that was no good, right? And of course you say yes, because we're all insecure. And they say, you're still not getting it. And you believe them, because all of us secretly believe we're shitty at what we love. And so, but then ironically, it increases your respect for them, because the more they call you out, the more they validate your secret fear that you are no good and that they're so much better than you'll ever be. And those sorts of people get a guru type, thing about them, because the more they criticize people, the more people respect them, right? But it's two totally different paradigms. And that's not to say that you can't sometimes call people out and say, what you're doing doesn't make sense. Or, why do you think this works? You can still, you don't have to be a cheerleader. The point is, when you look at another human being doing their best to express the artistic or spiritual impulse within them, there's always something you can validate. There's always something you can encourage. You can find something to make them understand they're capable of success. Are you doing that? Or are you consistently, sort of maiming them to the point where they have lost all belief in their own aptitude for this work? So, I do understand what Dion Fortune meant, but I think a lot of it comes down to the attitude of the authority, and whether it's empowering the people that give them their faith, or whether it's just a cult of personality, you know, when they're aggrandizing themselves by making everyone else feel like a neophyte.
I think though that point there, Jack, is where we run into problems maybe through a contemporary lens, because social media, right, and the internet has leveled everybody. You know, it's not that hard to start a bunch of social media accounts and make it look like you are this incredibly learned, amazing, authority figure. And a lot of it is narcissism. And I think there's also the pressure of everybody needs to have a side hustle. You know, so there's so much pressure now in any field, I would argue, but I see it a lot in the spiritual community and the occult. Oh, you're into this thing? Well, then make it your niche and make it your hustle and make it your living. And, don't worry if you don't know as much as you think you do. Just get yourself out there, set yourself up as the authority. I've had people say that to me. Like, I mean, obviously this is my full-time job. I'm a full-time reader, but people trying to kind of push me out the door to teach other people things. And I'm not at the point where I feel like I'm ready to do that yet. But you'll get this sort of pushback of like, oh no, you've got to make yourself sound like you're the authority. You've got to brand yourself as the guru. Like, if you don't do that, you're fucking up and you're not playing the game correctly. And I find that dangerous. And then of course that intersects with narcissistic personality types. And so we run into some problems.
Well, I'll add this too. You're a full-time reader in New Orleans, correct, Celeste?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So this is different from being a full-time reader in my town, which has 100,000 people in it. You're competing with hundreds of other self-proclaimed psychics and spiritualists and witches and everything, and you still are doing it full-time. Where do you practice? Remind me. Are you with
in my house?
With an organization? Okay.
Nope.
I couldn't remember.
Yeah, it's just me. I worked for a couple of places for a while, but then I struck out on my own because I don't play nicely with others. I prefer to do my own thing.
But that's a successful business you've built in a huge amount of competition. How do you feel that you accomplished that in such a competitive environment?
It's a good question.
It's an awesome question.
It is a good question. It is an awesome question. And I don't know that I have a good answer for it, but I think like I'm in a weird place as an occultist and as a magician where I have been practicing for a long time, since I was a teenager, but largely independently, largely solitary. And I need to feel like I have something totally unique and well-researched behind me, coming from that academic background as well, which I know a lot of people here also are coming from. And if I don't have my, list of cited sources, I don't want to be going out there and positioning myself as any kind of authority to teach anybody. So it's weird. I don't mind that though. And I think that's okay. I think practitioners generally have to admit when they don't know things and when they're not ready for things. And maybe you don't have the maturity or the skill or the research behind you to put yourself on that pedestal and say, yeah, come to me, I can teach you. I don't know. I kind of avoided answering your question there skillfully, I feel like. That's my answer there.
I just have, there's that old practice of making people wait for a long time in spiritual discipleship and learning. That's definitely something still alive and well and valid to a point, I think. I mean, when I started getting public, it was just I put up a little Patreon, and I basically made everyone who joined it wait a year before I did anything. So some people came and went, which, I mean, I don't know why I did that, but it was just felt, I don't know how, I don't understand my own path at times, but it led to much bigger things, but it also led to much more serious people. Same with like the podcast. I thought, what if I'm completely myself from the get-go, and even absurd and obscene in ways I would be if you knew me as a really good friend? What will that lead to? Maybe it'll lead to like more dedicated, interested, earnest listeners rather than just a large scale pop thing. And I was right about that. So it's interesting about how putting up some barriers or blinds or dissuading people to follow you is not such a bad thing. I don't know. It's an undeveloped thought. So if any of you have anything to say to that, go ahead. We've gotten wild already.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess that does intersect a little bit with this idea of marketability, which I think again intersects with the idea of authority in the contemporary occult community, which is like, do you want to be marketable to everybody? Do you want to position yourself as some kind of expert with a wide enough umbrella of whatever it is that you're teaching that, you know, hundreds of thousands of people are following you and you have 1 million TikTok followers or whatever, and you're making your 60-second videos dancing to Malkat Doma about whatever and pointing to things. I have no shade on TikTok people. I'm on TikTok. I'm too old for it, but I'm there, doing my best. Ooh. But, you know, do you want to do that, or do you want to hone down? And I think one of the things that really drew me to Jack's course, you know, and I found out about Jack's course because my friend Jawan Koo, who was also a very successful TikToker, had taken it and was talking about how great it was. And I liked that it was a niche. You know, this was not someone who was saying, I know everything about the Western esoteric tradition. Come to me and I'll teach you all of these things. It was, you know, here's this course that's compressed into a particular period of time. You know, it's I think whatever, it's 13 weeks. It's this specific material, and this is what I'm an expert in, and this is what I'm going to teach you. And I think, like, again, you can kind of bisect the community. You do have people, teachers, who are positioning themselves as an authority in these niche areas, which to me is perhaps a little bit more believable and attractive to me as a student and as someone who wants to learn. And then you have these people who are kind of going that more guru, almost like spirituality, occult, and self-help kind of space. And it's so broad that I kind of wonder, what are we learning? Oh, I started to throw shade there a little bit, and I apologize. We know what's up.
I don't know if I know what's up, but you know what you were saying
do.
actually made me think about something, Samuel, that you mentioned on the glitch bottle that'll come out soon, I'm sure, about the sort of Zachariah Sitchin crowd of Akkadian interpretation and translation being upheld as this authority, leading to, of course, these, you know, strained interpretations, shall we say. But partially as a result of the fact that people reading him often don't realize that Akkadian can be read, that there are scholars at the museums and in the universities who study this. I was just 2 years ago, I was at a lecture on Akkadian on the issue of magic and witchcraft and legality from a new tablet, because this guy found a chunk that had broken off an old Akkadian tablet, wrote his PhD on it. When I went to the lecture, these people are reading and studying this stuff. But so there's an interesting contrast there, with the Sitchin being the overwhelming authority in the popular world, but really not holding any water anymore in the academic world. That kind of tension of power and knowledge is something you could probably speak to, especially in your field, which is
absolutely.
stuff.
And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that these sensational topics are what draws people in. Everyone wants to have this notion, or everyone wants to hold on to this notion that ancient history is like Star Wars, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. However, the truth of the matter is much more mundane. There's this preconceived notion that all of these untranslated texts detail the evolutionary changes that mankind went through, and they're completely undecipherable and no one knows what they mean. However, a lot of these texts are like Excel spreadsheets. So you're looking at laundry lists, you're looking at grocery lists, you're looking at inventory. I mean, granted, there are mythological texts that have been codified. There's ritual that's been codified, liturgy that's been codified, history, but the religion, or rather the language that later informed the religion, that codified the religion, that language initially started as a means of keeping inventory. So I doubt these mysterious relics that people claim to hold all the secrets of the universe are really as sensational as people want to believe. Where am I going with this? I think, though, that when faced with the information that, you know, Zachariah Sitchin and Eric von Daniken and pretty much anyone else who is featured on the History Channel's Ancient Aliens program that I hope one day we'll see its eventual end, because it's become completely speculative. It's completely off the rails. When I was a kid and I read about stuff like this, I was like, this is so cool. And the earlier seasons, I was like, yeah, this is speculative. I can get behind that. But now it's like balls to the wall. We're going off the rails here, just like I am with my answer to this question. And
wasn't it you that said you didn't want to touch on Ancient Aliens, and here you are?
It was me who said I didn't want to touch on Ancient Aliens, and here I am touching on Ancient Aliens. Clearly it's a sore subject, and I need to write a fevered essay on my blog. He says
regarding that roundtable.
Yeah, but Sam raises a good issue, which is when the image of, in the popular imagination, when the image of Egyptian spirituality is Katy Perry's Dark Horse video.
Oh, good God.
When the image in the popular imagination of Sumerian spirituality is the god Zool in the Ghostbusters movie, in the Phantom Pyramid in the refrigerator, how do you, when you're trying to approach people with a traditional, current of spirituality that you've bothered to research and, and develop, how do you present it to them in a way that could compete with Ghostbusters or Ancient Aliens or Katy Perry? And I think there's a dual temptation. One, to go nuclear and talk about, how awful everything they like is, which is kind of a turnoff to people that like, I like that video, and I
well,
like
first of all, Jack, that is why people call me a literal academic, an insufferable mansplainer. Let's see, what other badges of honor do I have? Let me look at my list of trophies. No, it's absolutely mind-blowing, the things that people double down on. My personal favorite, though, is, again, back to the aliens thing. You're worshiping aliens, right? And my response to that is usually, and it's especially with people who are also in the Reconstruction current, so you get this a lot with heathens. No shade to heathens, though. But the response to them is usually, so if I'm worshiping aliens, who are you worshiping? And that's when the conversation stops, because nobody wants to admit that Thor is an alien, or that Odin is an alien, or that Freya is an alien. But it's okay to say that brown people in the Middle East who built ziggurats and amazing palaces were influenced by aliens. You would think that if aliens helped jumpstart human civilization, that they would have given us more longer lasting building materials instead of mud bricks. That's all I have to say about that.
It's an interesting. You're a funny guy. I just did a piece on the podcast, a 2-hour thing on the Sumerian Assyrian roots of the Tree of Life, because people often in Jewish Kabbalah, especially in the Madonna version, often talk about how it's let's say, and people in Kabbalah sometimes criticize pagans for polytheizing their monotheistic mysticism. But when you look at the Assyrian roots of the tree, it was a polytheistic thing that the Hebrews probably incorporated during the Babylonian captivity. And
they were in Babylon for quite a long time.
So they were, probably
something would rub off.
Yeah, it initiated into those cults and those practices in their long times there. And they already had sort of some of those ideas within the Israelite community that they had extracted from their formation out of Egypt. But so, really is, if you're taking Kabbalah, if pagans out there, if you're taking Kabbalah and like Yeats did, making it Irish or doing whatever you want with any, you are in a sense going back and resuscitating the original Assyrian Tree of Life, which is the oldest culture, it's the oldest root we have to it. And I'm so glad your glitch bottle episode I heard just today instead of before I did that 2-part thing, because I was totally calling him Ea, not Yah, the whole time. I didn't know.
It's okay as long as As long as you repent of your sin, your grievous sin, and
I thought about it,
you-
and it's good that I didn't know that, because had I actually called him Yah the whole time, listeners would have been confused who were following along with the text, and I would have had to address it. So now I get to do a whole follow-up episode. Maybe you'll guest on it, and I can address my foibles. But it's not my specialty. But I'm fascinated by that stuff. I never specialized in it because, like you said, you end up studying mostly tabulations of grain transports.
lots and lots of tabulations of grain transports.
Yeah.
Maybe a list of sheep and oxen, but yeah, grain, beer, more grain, more beer.
So this is sort of a wonderful transition to the topic that Zemmi and I talked about, including which was aliens, because apparently you three live in quite a alien-rich environment, shall we say? And Zemmi, you said you had some things to say about the modern human experience of aliens is fascinating to me. And I was an anti-aliens person up until a couple of years ago, with the whole government saying it's real. That changed some things, and large amounts of DMT changed some things for me. So I've never had an alien experience, and I'm fascinated by them, and I'm fascinated by the area of the land, the topography, and the history that you three all live in. And do you want to kick us off, leading from our brief touch on Samuel's ancient aliens? We're going to call them Samuel's ancient aliens from now on.
No, please,
Just
God,
hashtag.
Please, God.
You want to
no.
take us into a real conversation about what we really, I don't know. I'm passing it over to you, brother.
Oh man, I don't know where to take this conversation in this context.
Have you had an alien experience where you live or in your area?
Yeah, I've seen a lot. That was what I did more or less constantly for 2 or 3 years with my wife. We would go out and we would track weird lights and things, and or I would collect stories from people just around. In my mundane life, I'm a folklore columnist, so it was kind of my job.
So there are these lights popping up here and there all over the place, right? They're even showing up here in British Columbia. It's a ton of them, like crazy amounts of balls of light shooting around the skies. To me, that's something occultists, all of us should be interested in or talking about or coming up with far-fetched stone theories on, at least, if only for our own amusement.
Yeah, I mean, we've got records of these things happening for, at the very least, for decades. I don't know why I think it just kind of merged too quickly into the realm of conspiracy. Most people just ignore it. I mean, soft disclosure has been happening over the course of 3 years, and more or less nobody has paid any attention to it. So
do you think these balls of light, these orbs are multidimensional, or do you think there's some in between? I wonder if sometimes there's an in between thing of dimensions that we're just not there yet for understanding this stuff. I don't know. I have I only have questions. So if you have any thoughts or answers, just please share your thoughts.
Actually, one of the Neturist principles is all things are overlapping. I personally believe that they are sort of interdimensional. If you think about the physicality, if you think about what our bodies are made out of, it's mostly just a whole bunch of empty space and then non-physical electric pulses, basically. I think that there are probably ways for things to move in between those as well, other non-physical things. If you've ever seen the movie Buckaroo Banzai, Across the Eighth Dimension, I think it's probably just exactly like that.
Whereabouts are you all? The three of you. I'm just curious. I'm like, we don't have any of that stuff happen in New Orleans, weirdly. I mean, I'm not saying it never happens, but UFO sightings, all that stuff, very uncommon in New Orleans itself. And I have talked to other people who are ufologists, and they say there's like a bubble over this city, and something's happening magically, spiritually in New Orleans that incubates against that stuff. But I'd love to know where y'all at that this is happening. I know Arizona is huge for UFO sightings.
We're in central Illinois, so We
Okay.
have the Mississippi River on one side, we have the Illinois River, we have the Sangamon River. So we've got all of these confluences of water. And if you look at the folklore, and Zemmi can elaborate on this more, it seems as though wherever the water goes, these stories go with them. So if you overlay a map of the United States, with the United States' topography and waterways, you can also overlay onto that map areas where UFO sightings or unidentified, whatever you want to call them now, aerial phenomenon has been seen. And just from what I have seen anecdotally, it seems like there is some sort of connection between this aerial phenomenon and waterways and uncharted areas, so to speak.
Well, we also
I've heard. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, cut you off.
Well, we also just simply benefit from vast amounts of empty space as well. So I'm sure that these things are happening over New Orleans, but most people's attention is probably on the street. Whereas if you walk through the prairies of Illinois, you're much more likely to watch, to see something like this happening. I do think though, that you can interact with it. I do think that it is, if you've ever read The Eighth Tower by John Keel, the guy who wrote the Mothman prophecies, I do think that we can interact with these things, and they can with us as well.
So I'm curious, Zemmi, so some people are saying that these are just man-made things by, a foreign government, or, well, I guess, or your own, because you guys, for me, a foreign government, you guys, Canada represent, but to me that seems outlandish that all these balls of light UFO sightings are some secret government, whether us, you, China, or something like that. I mean, it just seems too crazy. Is that your feeling on that?
Well, I don't trust anybody with $1 billion. So
that's the quote of the day.
Zemmi, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. You probably don't want to trust me because I won the lottery, and I'm not gonna share it. So as you were.
The military industrial complex benefits from most people not knowing what's going on. So I do think that there's probably, it's simply, war machines being constructed and piloted and tested, maybe even things that are far beyond our understanding even. But I do think also some of it is like I don't know what the word is, like just a normal occurrence, I guess.
What about the theory that some of these things are some kind of phenomena that is choosing to show itself to us as, space aliens, UFOs, but in, say, the 15th century might have been presenting itself as the Fae, fairies, or what have you.
That's what I believe it is. That's what I think that a lot of what we do in general is. It's just a force beyond ourselves, manifesting in a way that is familiar or not threatening, but it, as it exists for thousands of years, it changes. As our life cycle is just several decades. It stays the same or evolves differently.
Yeah, I came across that idea a year or so ago, 18 months ago, and instantly there was a resonance there for me. I was like, this makes a lot of sense, actually. And then I started reading Passport to Magonia, some of those other books, and I was like, yep, all right. This tracks, this makes sense.
Samuel, are there actual spaceship-like things in Sumerian art, in your opinion? I mean, we've all seen all the images that everyone
We've all
shows
seen the
everyone.
images, the winged disc with the quote-unquote ancient astronaut piloting it, which is really a god in his glory, suspended in the air with his divine wings. Looking at it from an historical iconography standpoint, no, because the gods were depicted in a specific manner, and the manner in which they are depicted is what we see in these reliefs. So, I think that in order to understand those reliefs, we have to look at the culture. We have to look at the significance of their symbology, their artistic expression, because what we would see as an airplane, to them, there would be no comprehension of that. They wouldn't comprehend what they were seeing. So they would use some sort of poetic language. I don't know. I don't like to speculate too much, because I think that you run the risk of making a fool of yourself, and I already do that enough. So I tend to take things at face value and move on. I don't like to look into the or intuit what that symbolism is, or anything outside of the scope of what academia has already informed us. So yeah, that's my answer. My roundabout answer.
I just want to throw out there as a footnote, I think intuit is the best neologism of our generation. Because you all know that it's actually a new word from our generation, essentially. And I think that's awesome. I just wanted to say that. Footnote. For all the new words that we're creating all the time. Jack, I feel like I have to ask you what you think about aliens. You seem like such a wise man. I mean, you have glasses and a beard, and oh wait, that's all of us.
I have glasses and a beard. Are you saying that I'm a fool?
I have glasses and a beard. I do have glasses, but I'm not wearing them. I don't have a beard though. I have one hair that keeps growing out of my chin. The older I get, it's not quite a beard. Might get there one day. We'll see.
The older, the difference here, RC, is I'm the oldest one present. And as you get older and begin falling apart physically, you have to up your game stylistically. These fashionable glasses I'm wearing came from Walgreens and cost $24, and the beard is meant to cover serious weight gain. So between the two of them, I appreciate the fact that my attempt to appear wise and, scholarly is paying off, because it's a relatively cheap gambit. And so far it's worked pretty well. So I'm glad.
Your chicanery is masterful, brother. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I have a personal relation with Jehuty since playing her in grade 8 in Macbeth. I wanted to be one of the witches, but the teacher said, you're not a girl, so you can't be a witch, and cast me as Jehuty.
You can't be a witch because you're not a girl, but you can be a goddess of liminal spaces.
Now you're thinking like a Waldorf teacher.
Dude, get it. Be a bearded goddess.
Plus, I was a practicing Wiccan, so you can imagine I was nonplussed by her logic. But yeah, it's Waldorf school, so you win some, you lose some.
It's interesting, to tie in something that got said earlier. The thing about the alien fascination that people experience is it's a paradigm that lets normal people that would never go near the occult talk about powers and beings from outside their sphere of existence who are interested in them, that are possible to contact them, and to whom you can enter into a relationship with. So if you look beyond the trappings of flying saucers and some of the gaudier elements, I think you see this hunger among people to connect with the stars, literally, to connect with celestial powers, to connect with this idea of the other, creatures of a world that is literally unseen. And in some ways, the world we're all involved in now is the exact same impulse, but it's directed toward historical and sociological and a different cultural direction. They look to the this futuristic concept of people from other worlds. We look to the past, the traditions of countries we're fascinated with, and with tech that we find exciting and meaningful. And I mean, I feel like we're lucky. All 5 of us have engaged with traditions and systems that we find validating, and we double down, and we feel like we've got a fish on the line. And even if it's still 99% a mystery, we have a door, we have a window into that world whether it's tarot cards or Egyptian, iconography, whether it's Sumerian, a cuneiform, whether it's Greek myth, it's a window into a world that's gave us access to this idea of unseen powers. And that's what's so exciting. But a lot of people aren't drawn to that world. It's hard to get people excited about a cultural system that they attribute to being just, sort of silly pop culture aspects, or they associate it with school or a history class or something like that. But yet they'll gravitate to aliens because Star Wars, because the Alien movies, because they've had decades of conditioning of exciting visual, mind-blowing experiences in the movie theaters and TV that excited them and inflamed their imagination. And I think some of the challenge for people like us who want to share our passion with some people might be intrigued but on the fence is to share what's beautiful and vivid and life-changing and mind-blowing and shatters preconceived notions about the spiritual traditions we work with. I love Samuel's upcoming book, The Order of the Rod and Ring, presents these beautiful Sumerian gods in these dynamic, vivacious, humorous, sexy, powerful, imagery that's very in sync with the original traditional systems, but they seem fresh, they seem alive, they're exciting, they're, they get you interested in it, just like, Zem's book of Flesh and Feather. It's a complete contemporary iteration of the god Thoth. There's nothing dusty about it. It's a contemporary articulation of a spirit of art and creativity and inspiration and renewal and all that. And I think, and just without even having a reading from Kia, I know she's being modest. I mean, she's being modest.
Whatever
but
my name is.
Okay. But to be working full time, you must find a way to open that world of divination of the spirits that you talk to people about in a way that keeps people coming back, or that spreads the word of mouth. If you're not advertising heavily, and if you're not, doing that, then it comes from making a meaningful connection interpersonally, where people say, I'm going back and I'm bringing a friend this time. That's how you're the only one making a full-time living off this. And I know that's how it's done. So I think that's the challenge for all of us too. It's easy to throw shade at, people with basic ideas, but the bigger challenge for us is, how do you enliven and excite people about these worlds that we're involved in, to give them something of value when they're surrounded by so much trash? It's like trying to interest someone in a healthy meal when they've grown up on junk food. And that's the challenge. How do you present to them something of value, of worth? It's exciting, that's transformative, that's consistent, but is contemporary, and in a way that actually moves them and gives them something of wonder and awe in today's world, which is full of anxiety and depression, and everything's kind of banal, and you're being bombarded with data and blasé stuff all day long. How do you make it fresh, right? That's the trick. So Kia, how do you do it?
One thing I want to say about that is the bottom line, of course, is still you have to be good, right? Like as a kid, I was taken around a lot of psychics by my astrologer mother, but you could tell the ones who were good versus not good, right? And like, I think the only sort of psychical thing in our friendship I've ever asked you, the response was, I can't get anything out of this person. And that was like, a phony psychic would be like, just make something up if they couldn't see through someone's sphere, or if the person was protected. And the fact that you're like, couldn't see anything, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. Those sort of things. So it's a qualitative practice, psychism, for sure. It's something no one likes to really talk about too much, because we're all special, of course, but anyway.
We're all X-Men. We're all Harry Potter.
Totally.
We're all students at Hogwarts or Breaksbills or Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters.
Well, we're definitely forming those things, whether we like it or not, independently and collectively. This is quite a magical renaissance or revolution or whatever you want to call it. I mean, this is probably the most exciting time to be into our subjects since the Alexandria was burned.
Well,
perhaps.
I don't know about you. I don't really have any interest in fighting Dark Lords. I hear things don't go well for people who do.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that part of it.
No
Plus,
wars,
you know,
no witch wars.
we'll just
No
cancel
witch wars
them.
today.
Dark
There you
Lord
go.
is
Cancel
canceled.
them all and write a fevered essay.
Hashtag cancel Voldemort. That's the way.
There actually
It's
is
true,
someone
though.
called
I was-
Voldemort in the Golden Dawn, so that has a
Oh,
double
good
meaning.
Lord.
Yeah.
Boy, howdy.
Anyway, let's not get into that. But yeah,
Yikes
But
on
yeah, no, I
bikes.
mean, I was thinking about this the other day about the fact that it is, you know, I think it's easy to forget because we're all living day to day, paying our bills, just trying to get through life. But it is easy to forget how present magic and the occult current is in day to day life for like a lot of people. And I mean, granted, I'm in a bubble living in New Orleans because, as Jack said, I mean, this is just like, it's like living in Salem, Massachusetts. It's like every second person you meet, even if they're not a full-time practitioner, you know, someone's mama, someone's grandma has an altar to whatever in the back of her house and she doesn't talk about it. Like, it's just, you know, it is a part of day-to-day life here. But I think even in mainstream culture, it's much more accepted. And yeah, I mean, it's a diluted version of practice. It's, you know, it's TikTok witchcraft and it's, you know, whatever passes for, you know, witchcraft now, which isn't even Wicca anymore. It's, you know, it's so far diluted even from Wicca that it's, you know, to be almost unintelligible, but it is everywhere. And oh boy, that was a face. Go on. You have thoughts. I want to hear them.
No,
I didn't realize that my face was seen by everyone.
Is that your face?
I have a hard time controlling my expressions, especially when it comes to
Same.
things that I'm very passionate about. And moving on.
What's your sign, Samuel?
What's my sign?
Yeah. What's the sign,
Do not
baby?
enter. No, I'm a Virgo sun with Scorpio moon and Sagittarius rising. So
Ooh,
I
boy.
see
It's a lot of mutable energy.
There,
a
There
lot
it
of
is.
mutable energy. Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
are we gonna
yeah.
we gonna do the roll call now and find out everybody's signs? I want to hear everybody speak
Oh.
free since we're going there.
Jack will never tell you because Jack is an international man of mystery and likes
True.
to cultivate that mystique. So
It's because Jack doesn't know anything about astrology. That's what. That's.
I don't know. It sounds like Jack's a triple Scorpio to me. If you don't want to tell anybody.
Jack, are you an Aries?
No, I was born in January. I'm an Aquarius.
Well, that's the best sign.
I'm glad you
Not that
said.
you're biased.
Yeah, Sun, Mercury, and Mars in Aquarius conjunct, and then 3 planets in Libra. I'm all air. Nothing in water. One thing in Earth.
I'm a Scorpio. That's all I know. But I do share a birthday with Charles Manson.
Nice.
Wow.
So
I share a birthday with Justin Timberlake. So,
we'll just say
you know, between the two of us, we have a party.
Amazing.
Justin Timberlake and Charles Manson.
It's the same day as Thomas Merton as well. So there you go. That's a
They're
better
both
one.
very good
But yeah,
dancers.
Manson, you're a
There you go.
Scorpio born on Manson's birthday. That is, it's a good thing you're married and not in the dating pool anymore, eh?
oh my God.
You wanna see something kind of cool? Watch, look this out. Hold on.
Wait,
Oh my gosh.
what's happening?
What's happening?
I love it.
Start
I
the
love it.
bus.
We're officially off script.
We're
Amazing.
officially on
You
Magic
see that?
Without Fears. That is someone's tooth. How's the person
This is
doing?
Charles Manson's tooth.
Oh.
I probably should have asked if I should have
Should
gotten
we
this
banish?
out.
I'm banishing.
Hey, Zemmi, you should tell the story about that time that we did that thing and we heard a pig snorting and other weird things happened.
You should tell
You
him about
know.
You should tell him about Manson's phone call too.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, the
let's we're
story.
doing
Yes,
this
I
now.
wanna
We're
hear
doing
him.
this now.
Well, what Sam is talking about, I think I told you on our interview that I benefit from having very level-headed people around me all the time. So even the most craziest things, so long as it's happening around my wife, I know that it's actually true and it's not all up here, you know, or Sam or Jane or Jack. Well, once Sam, my wife, and I don't remember why, but we decided to try to do a seance at the very beginning of our friendship.
Now,
And
also keep in mind that Zemmi and his wife live in a historic area in the city in which we reside. So continue.
yeah, and our apartment is full of bones and strange memorabilia. It's an eccentric place. So we do this seance with a Ouija board and the whole bit, and I don't think anything ever happened with the Ouija board. But I was recording the whole entire thing. And at one point I asked if I have something of theirs in the house. And we didn't hear anything. But when I listened to the EVP back later, right after I finished asking that question, there was a very clearly audible pig grunting sound. And what's kind of trippy about that is I've got a box of pig bones from one of my old jobs that an old man had fallen into his a pen of hogs basically and had a stroke, and they started to eat him. So they just had to kill all of the hogs and pile them up in this great big pile down by the river, and it just kind of sat there, you know. And I found them a couple of years later, so I just got all the bones, you know, because whatever. So is that what you're talking about, Sam?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
That for a while my apartment was haunted by the ghost of a guy that got eaten by pigs. Yeah.
This
Good
episode
times.
is sponsored by Shudder, so this is appropriate. Oh, that is. Do you have a good local folklore alien story though before we wrap that subject up entirely? Because yeah, you got me all excited. And the three of you are hang out.
We did
together.
have an experience where we were on the prairie. There's this prairie outside of town. It's on 190 acres. There's a man-made hill. It's a sledding hill. We've also done ceremonial ritual there. But we were on the prairie. We were going to perform some sort of ceremonial ritual at night. I think it was shortly after the new moon, may have been shortly before. In any case, we are walking down to the bottom of the prairie at this veritable crossroads where the prairie trails branch off. And we happen to look up and we see these lights moving in tandem, and they're moving across the sky, and then suddenly they just separate. That happened a lot. Jack has seen these lights too. He won't admit it.
but
other
you're
other
saying
rational
they separate
people,
too fast for ships that we have.
I would say so, yes. Yeah. And because the thought of extraterrestrials terrifies me, I like to read things on Reddit so I can stay up late at night wondering if I'm going to be abducted or if my house is going to be invaded by humanoids. But I was reading something that someone had written, and they stated that what we're actually seeing are not so much experimental aircraft, it's drones. And the drones are operating in a manner that we're not used to seeing. So if they move in tandem and then they separate, or if they strobe and then the light ceases, you know, that's what they're programmed to do.
The problem with that, of course, is some of the velocities that you're seeing. Like if it's just like gone,
yes,
right?
Like
also,
that Tic Tac video.
They've been seen. These same lights in the sky have been seen for long before we had anything close to drones. That's right. The other problem with the drone. I think that's a slide down the theory mountain, as the conspiracy theorists would call it. You know, they keep coming up with reasons to justify why the Queen of England is not a reptilian, and it's like, okay,
Well, we're all reptilians, and I don't know about you, but I've been vaccinated, so I have Nephilim DNA swimming around inside my
oh my
bloodstream right
God.
now.
If they
I'm
called the
emitting 5G
vaccine,
signals, and I'm growing wings and 6 talons as we speak.
dude, if they actually called the vaccine like the Nephilim, I would probably then take it.
Stick it in my veins.
Yeah. Well, here's hoping that I can leave my country again without being vaccinated. So let's all pray. Let's all pray for that.
We'll see.
If you have like 3
We'll
autoimmune
see.
diseases, everything I'm hearing is like, don't take it. If you got like that meant 3 comorbidities for bad reactions, that's what I'm hearing. It's like,
Three is a lot.
that's a
of
lot.
autoimmune
That's a
disorders.
lot.
I'll give you that.
So
I have one. I
I'm still-
survived. I'm
I'm
here.
not ready to
you
die.
know.
I'm all for morphing my DNA into Nephilim DNA. The Nephilim passage of Genesis 6:1-4 was actually my focal exegesis in divinity school. So that was an interesting thing.
Sweet.
And then everyone
Sweet
got
deal.
upset with me when I put it out. Put it out on Amazon as a book. People got upset with me because there was no Watchers or Gregory and stuff. I'm like, yeah, I didn't touch on the pseudepigrapha or extra canonical literature. They're like, well, then what's the point then? I'm like, it's biblical exegesis.
See, that's the thing.
linguistics.
That's the thing that
Like,
draws people
mostly
in. It's
what
all
I'm
this
ta-
sensational stuff.
Yeah, most of the book is me talking about the enclitic mem, which is a mem added instead of being a pluralization of the yod mem. It's meant to actually denote a different version of the verb nephal, which we defal. And it's boring. It's boring. Of course it is. It's Hebrew exegesis.
You
and that's it.
boring
So
academic.
I know. I need to. I'm going to now. Fortunately, my desire was to write that, and that hopefully, because mine was the most advanced academic study on that passage at the time, and finally a PhD came along, and then did do a further study of that passage. I was shocked at how little study had been done, because when I wrote it, I read everything that had been written on it, all the way down through the Midrash and the Targums and everything in Hebrew and Aramaic for the Targum Onkelos and stuff. And then I had to put that together a comment. But fortunately, a PhD did do a more advanced study, brought in a lot of the pseudepigraphic writings, and now I could actually expand my work so that it might be more interesting to the general public because that PhD did that work. So that's what's awesome about academia. I think we people need to understand that scholarship is about presenting the best possible argument. It's not presenting a strong argument because you are sure you're right and nothing's ever going to change. It's because you want to be really, when you're convinced that you're wrong or when you're surpassed, it's got to be you want to be surpassed at your best, not when you've given it a half-ass attempt. And that's what
Oh my
people need to
God, yes,
understand.
absolutely.
So when I present a point as strongly and thoroughly as I can, it's not because I am that desperate to not be surpassed. It's because I'm that desperate to be surpassed. But it has to be done. It has to be valid and really take things farther than my work could. And that way and then we're playing leapfrog in knowledge.
Right.
That's the point. And I hope that people listening understand that whether you're an independent scholar or tied to shackled to a university, that is the goal. It's to further our group learning, not to get on a pedestal and hold your medals to your chest. So should we talk about drugs?
Mic drop. Only the legal kind, because I can't do drugs and I don't want to.
Yes. Well, no one here obviously has on YouTube has ever done drugs, heard of drugs, or heard what they are, unless okay, that joke's old. But here in Canada, things like peyote and 5-MeO DMT and obviously cannabis and soon mushrooms are legal, but that's not the point. The point is, the first time I did DMT, I saw these reptilian alien beings that told me I had to return to Earth and get as many people to do as much DMT as possible. This is only interesting to me because I was, at that time, 2 years ago, very anti-aliens. Like my dad always said, oh, there's got to be aliens. Look, and he would look at the skies and show me, like, there's mathematically, there must be many civilizations. And, I just never bought into it in any real way. But having that first DMT experience with my friend Chris Bennett, who's written a lot on that sort of stuff, right, in his Lever 420 and other books, it was weird to see reptilians because I had only heard about them peripherally from my friends who were into the aliens, and I didn't even know that they were a big thing. Like I didn't know that was a thing, that the reptilian thing was a thing. Like my buddy Jeff in the 90s was like the Queen of England's a reptilian, and I thought he was joking. But no, this is a whole thing. Like it's a really big thing. So when I was in this DMT realm and saw these like aliens over these crystals, and they turned to me and saw me, they were surprised to see me, and they told me this message, and it was a terrifying thing to be told, because I felt at my core it was true and that I should do what they wanted. And at the same time, I'm like, am I really talking to multidimensional reptilians? So
when they spoke to you,
yeah, it was scary, and I was
really did you perceive it in an audio sense, or was it more in a mental? Speaking
into my head, all the voices were in my head, but I was very much in that realm. It was a sufficient amount that I was able to turn around and look around me, and I was in this crystalline cave. And I actually did, like I've always done with DMT and Changa, used my training in ritual magic to move about places as best I can. To me, that's the real challenge, is can I go to different places rather than just be taken for a ride? So that was one of the places I went to on that trip. And it was shocking to me to see what I could identify as these sort of this crystalline landscape with these like reptilians. There's no other word to describe them by. So it made me think maybe these are a multidimensional thing that are out there. I mean, I don't believe it was just something yanked from my subconscious, because it was something that I had so eschewed and completely thought was goofy from the first time I heard about them and I'd never focused on it. I didn't even know it was a real thing. And this wasn't like a dream. So that was shocking to me to see this connection. And that was when I first started thinking about, is there something going on here? And the fact that they told me to make sure that me and everyone else, it's a sort of a terrifying edict to be given, is to make sure everyone does as much of this as possible. Like if it was heroin, we would all be terrified and be like, oh my God, Jesus Christ, what a demonic thing you just had happen to you. But it's like, is there something going on? I'm curious now. And in the 20-something trips I've done since then, and especially last year, I've been exploring a lot of things, but I've never seen anything like that again. Never had an experience like that again. I've also never tried to go into such dark realms as I was intentionally going into. When I first did that trip, it was at the Soma Institute run by Chris Bennett in the Okanagan here, where they grow all these things and have the toads and everything. You can go there and run retreats and stuff. And it was in this big massive teepee that fits like 40, 50 people with fire in the middle. It was a magical experience. But my first thing that happened was I invoked Thoth, because this is what Tahutians do, right, Zemmi? I invoked Jehuty and put on that god form and shot up as high as I could and experienced some divine realms. But being very familiar and comfy in those divine realms, I was instantly sort of bored. I was like, okay, let's go down. Take me down to those dark places like Jesus did. And I went down as deep as I could and saw some horrific landscapes. And then coming out of that, I went to this other weird place that I was sort of pulled into with these weird creatures. So that was my first experience of DMT. And I think about it to this day, as you can tell. That leads us into this idea of what's the role of entheogens these days, since they're becoming mainstream and popular. And there's such a crossover between them and esoteric practices going back to ancient Assyria. I mean, when they are doing these, they were using entheogens in Egypt and Syria and all of these places. They were experimenting with opiums and psilocybins and DMT. And the more we talk about that and understand that was a part of their culture, the more it opens up questions about their role in popular spirituality, especially as we revitalize some of these older forms.
Well, traces of THC or cannabis oil, whatever, were recently found on an unearthed horned altar in, I think, Israel, or in and around the vicinity.
I didn't know about that. I knew about the altar scrapings that happened just a while ago.
So again, your point is being proven, that ancient relics are being found with obvious traces of these now illicit substances.
Well,
curious to see the research. I mean, that's not my field of study.
It's in Numbers.
I do find it interesting. Yes, absolutely.
In Numbers 30, the Abramelin point, as it's called now, it's called the Abramelin incense, but that's not what it was called back then. It's just, the oil has cannabis in it, or calamus. I mean, some Hebrew scholars try and tell you that it's not cannabis, but we know it was cannabis.
We don't want you to know.
About some, yeah. even my Hebrew teachers were like, oh, we don't know what it was. Like, they had fields of cannabis back then. If they didn't have this, if cannabosum wasn't the phrase used to refer to cannabis, then they literally had no word for something they grew fields of, hemp, right? So either that word does refer to that, or they didn't have a word for something they cultivated, which doesn't make any sense.
Which doesn't make any sense, because they would have ascribed a name to everything that they were familiar with. Cannabis, or it's alleged to be cannabis, was apparently sacred to Ishtar. But the information that I found about that has been very anecdotal. I can't find anything that's more definite or has more, I want to say, academic backing. So unfortunately, I can't speak to anything beyond that anecdotal statement.
Yes, I understand those might be constraints on this topic a little bit. Does anyone want to comment on the potential theoretical role of entheogens in spiritual practices, and especially occultisms?
Well, ancient Egyptian medical papyri are full of references of shum shomet, which is cannabis, and probably the second most invoked god in medical papyri is Jehuty. So it is a part of what I do over here.
I will say, I apologize.
I love that you clapped.
I'm talking to people.
I love it.
Let me talk. I will say, one of my friends mentioned, since barley was a major staple in the ancient Near East, it is possible that a lot of the more psychedelic experiences, so to speak, may have been the result of ergot. So that's something, if I recall correctly, that was instrumental in the Salem witchcraft craze. So who knows? Again, something that's anecdotal but worth looking into.
Yeah, my friend, our fellow Aquarius Jack, Thomas Hatsis, the scholar and witch, has some great books through inner traditions, psychedelic mystery traditions, and the Witch's Ointment, which looks over the history of those different things. He's the main foil to Brian Murarescu's new book, The Immortality Key, and Chris Bennett and Tom Hatsis did a little threesome with Brian Murarescu on their channels, addressing the ergot issue in fortified wines, because ergot was used to produce LSD. Though what his point was interesting is that it probably wasn't as common as people supposed, especially for the Eleusinian mysteries, because it was so difficult to do. And if you did it wrong, you died. So it was much more likely, given they had ready access to mandrake and cannabis and opium, more likely they probably used the things that were easy and safer than going through the arduous process of doing ergot. So they definitely did use ergot to make LSD compounds and have those experiences in religions and ceremonies, but it was probably less common than we think. It was probably one of the more minor ones because of the complexity and difficulty and danger. So that's interesting. Thomas Hatsis is a good one to have on a future roundtable if anyone wants to get deep in the weeds with witchcraft and ointments and stuff. But do you know anything, Zemmi, about mushroom usage in Egypt? Because I know a lot of people in the popular world, I don't want to call it the frou-frou woohoo world, but it's sort of the woohoo world, talk about mushrooms being in the pyramids, and they were all doing mushrooms in the pyramids. But I don't think that's actually something that we really know. Have you come across that?
No, and in fact, I'm not even sure off the top of my head if mushrooms are readily available, even food source in Egypt.
Back then, yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
I don't know. People can figure out a way to believe just about whatever they want to believe with regards to all of that. So for the most part, I kind of ignore a great chunk of it.
There's Celeste, you have experience, especially mixing herbs with other things for lucid dreaming. Do you want to share some of your insights and experience with people about that?
I feel like whatever I have to say is going to be deeply disappointing. I have to be real, I think, there's this, because of this thing that we're talking about earlier with this sort of proliferation of witchcraft, hashtag witchcraft, everywhere on the internet, and businesses popping up right, left, and center to sort of sell these products or these services. You have all these companies selling, flying ointments. Like there's a bunch of companies that produce salves and flying ointments and things like that, which the packaging is always amazing, and these things always smell incredible. And you have sort of flower essences and stuff. And I've used a bunch of that stuff because I'll try anything once, and I really would rather be asleep most of the time having a lucid dream. I don't really enjoy conscious reality, so absolutely sign me up for anything that might increase my capacity to experience these things. But I don't know that I've ever used anything that I think has, measurably improved my ability to achieve a lucid state. I smoke mugwort occasionally, I think I'm safe to say that. I don't think that there's any illegal situation going on with the good old mugwort plant. I think that's probably still legal on some level. Anyway,
people post videos of them doing on YouTube, like DMT and all these drugs. So I'm pretty sure talking about it on YouTube is fine, because
they're not coming for me and my mugwort. That's not a problem.
Never again.
Right. Not mugwort, not even once.
Never again the mugwort times.
Well, mandrake's an interesting one.
Yeah, so I don't know, like the mugwort, I sometimes I drink it in a tea. Sometimes I have, I smoke it a little bit. I haven't noticed nothing so dramatic that I'm like, oh, fuck, that was definitely the mugwort, and then I have some like datura ointments and stuff like that I will use occasionally. I think a lot of it in those small doses, in that way of dosing it, is probably psychosomatic. I think probably it's a kind of placebo effect. But my stance on the placebo effect is that's the underpinning principle of most magic. So look, if you want to buy your datura ointment, I see your face again. I'm seeing those eyebrows shoot up. I'm like, he's got thoughts. I want to hear him. But yeah,
I like to keep those to myself.
The eyebrows go up, the thoughts stay inside. I see. But yeah, I think it's interesting to play with those things, but I have a feeling that in the ways that we are, contemporaneously administering them, these products that we're buying, I can't imagine that biologically, medically, it's doing, or chemically, it's doing much to you, I would think.
I think it's also because it's so readily accessible, or it's being presented as readily accessible, it takes away I don't want to say the mystique. I think it takes away the ceremony that is required, that goes with the use of these plants. I remember reading a text, and again, it's anecdotal because I don't remember the title, but I remember reading how this certain indigenous group viewed not nightshade, moonflower, datura as a means of spiritual travel. However, it was supposed to be used with another entheogen, because without combining the two, the datura gave you wings, but it drug you straight to hell. Whereas combining the two, it gives you wings, so to speak, like Red Bull, but it carries you off of the earthly plane into the spiritual plane. And I would love to get my hands on that book again, because there were some interesting parallels there with the descent to the underworld. And
totally.
Yeah.
I don't think this is the book that you're talking about, but I know that Peter Gray touches on that kind of thing a little bit in Apocalyptic Witchcraft, and kind of goes into that discussion a little bit. And yeah, for sure. And I think you're right. I think it's the same thing, right, with things like peyote retreats, or, you have, your Gwyneth Paltrow goop people paying whatever it is to like go for a weekend to wherever it might be, and, trip out and vomit in a bucket and have their, $1,000 spiritual
I'm
experience
inclined to think that it's diet peyote. So.
quick shout out to our sponsors, Goop. Thank you, Gwyneth, for she sold this psychic vampire defense oil or something to do with that.
Yes.
And then
the
even once
candle. I think it was a
then,
candle.
yeah, it was, and then it got like criticized in a way that showed that I think you could have some negative effect, but they kept selling it anyway or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, Goop. Okay. Anyway,
well, she's doing well for herself.
You know,
Gotta
when
say that, you know.
when
Witchcraft. Ooh.
Yeah, Gwyneth Paltrow, she needed a lot of help selling overpriced things to people to do well in life. Yeah, I think she was sort of born royalty, wasn't she? But when I was
that's
young,
true.
I didn't drink or do drugs until like 24. I didn't even experiment at all with like cannabis, and I would make incenses. I would grind my own incenses and make incenses. And what I noticed was, because I was initiated at 7 years old into Maharishi's system and through my family, and that's how I grew up meditating every day. And I was very sensitive, for sure. And I noticed massive changes, even if I would mix lavender and sandalwood, or, you know, copal, frankincense, and sandalwood, or then mixed in this other thing. Every different concoction of incense when I meditated had radically different effects on me, and made major changes in me, to the extent that when I would have birthday parties in my Waldorf school childhood, my classmates, you know, who were all drinking and smoking weed, they'd come over, and sure enough, it was a staple at my birthday parties that at some point I would take them all into my room, all the girls and boys, all 12 or 20 of us, and they'd all sit in a circle in my bedroom with the candles lit, and I'd burn an incense, and we'd all close our eyes and meditate. And to this day, actually, if any of them ever find out my magical name, Frater R.C., and find out like, wait, I know that dude, and hear me say this, like, thank you all for doing that. Because what was really cool about it was they all had experiences. We'd also, like, you know, you get 5 to 20 people sitting in a circle holding hands and burning this concoction, and like maybe with some sort of intonation. And these kids, who really would probably rather be getting wasted at a grade 8 or grade 10 birthday party, had crazy experiences, and they expressed altered states and tremendous things. Like, I can't even tell you all the different things that they said. And they did this every year. They came back to my birthday parties knowing exactly what was going to happen. Right. And I think there's something to be said about just, yeah, spiritual practices and the impact that like they're even saying frankincense is so psychoactive now, just minorly. These things do have tremendous impacts on us when we are sensitizing ourselves through spiritual practices like meditation and ritual. Like, it opens us up to have crazy experiences with things that would otherwise not affect the normal sober mind in the same way. I think I'm just trying to open it up to this, exploring this with you all.
I think you're right. And like, having just, you know, verbally thrown all those products under the bus and been like, they don't work, I'm going to now backtrack slightly and say, imagine that. And say that, like, I think that this is the key, though, is that, like, are you using something in a ritual context, or are you just buying it on Etsy and then slapping it on your wrists and being like, well, now I'm going to drink my, like, bottle of vodka and slap this salve on and go to sleep and fuck it, you know? Because in the instances that I have used it within a ritual context, it has had a different effect. So, you know, that is definitely a thing, for sure.
It elevates it. It takes it out of the profane and puts it into the context that it's supposed to be used in.
That's why I like the term entheogen. When I only discovered it about 5 years ago in my friend Dr. Angela Voss's work, and I was like, what is this? And then I was like, oh, this is the term being used by academics to describe psychedelic and psychoactive substances being used in ritual settings. But
drugs.
My experience, yeah, I mean, it's you know, given my early youthful experiences of regular herbs, or herbs, you guys say herbs, right? Plants and medicines being powerful in ritual settings, my whole childhood, like, just really powerful. It's made me think that the entheogen term is just actually quite a broad term, that it can encompass whatever incenses or scents or herbs you are using in oils and in your rituals, as long as it's in the context of the ritual. That's what entheogen encompasses. I don't want to dominate all the time, but I
Well,
don't want to pick on
no,
anyone,
I
but I'm
mean,
very curious to see what each of you, how that plays a role in your traditions.
well,
Um,
I'm gonna I just want to, I'll shut up after this probably, but maybe, who knows. But I think also approaching, and this is going to sound maybe crunchy or whatever, and I'm not, from a tradition necessarily that approaches things from
Crunchy or
this.
shady?
Oh, that's the real question. Maybe both, crunch and shade. A little column A, a little column B. But plants have spirit, right? Like everything has spirit. And I think approaching something from a place of respect as well. And that ties into the idea of elevating something in a ritual context. But, I have this beautiful greenhouse in my backyard now. Over quarantine, I saved up money and I hired this amazing lesbian contractor, shout out to Lauren, and got her to build this beautiful greenhouse out of salvage windows in my backyard. So I'm growing all my own herbs now. And that to me makes a difference, because I develop a relationship with the plant over the course of growing it. I bought datura seeds on the internet the other day. So I'm soaking the datura in water and hydrogen peroxide before I plant the seeds, and growing that relationship with the plant as I go. I mean, I'm not at a point where I'm able to extract anything from it and make anything out of it. Maybe eventually I'll get there, but that makes a difference rather than just going down to the Botanica and buying whatever it is pre-dried. So I think, it's respect for what you're working with as well, and acknowledging that this thing has a life, that it is giving to you, sacrificing for you so that you can ingest it or you can use it. That changes things, in my opinion.
Well, also when you approach something in a ritual sense, if you view something as holy and perform ritual with it, you're closing off all of the outside world except for the world within your ritual. With less to get in the way, things like incense and herbs have room to sort of expand a little bit, if that makes sense. They mean more if your world is smaller. So, I mean, there's a reason why most ancient texts specify which incense to use at what time. There's a reason why you had all of those, varying experiences. You were interacting with them in a sense. They were holy to you. They have a personality just as much as you or I do.
Yeah.
Jack, I'm very curious about the role of incense in your PGM work and your devotion to Hecate, the role of incense, entheogens, and all of such things. Is that a big part of your practices?
You know what? It's something I need to explore more fully. I can say that when I do Hecatean work, I burn myrrh, and I've come to associate that scent with her and with that devotional side of things that I try to do as much as I can. With the Dionysian work I do, I burn storax, and I've gotten to where I like that a lot. It has a more acrid scent that's very heady, and I've come to really rely on that, and it's kind of hard to find. So I like that very much. I'm always surprised that the Orphic hymns, they only list a couple of, after each of these 100 hymns, they list which incense to burn. And really, it's the same 3 or 4. It's either frankincense or myrrh, or, there's a couple of 2 more that they might recommend. And it's hard to determine the pattern. The pattern's not as straightforward as you would think. And sometimes it seems kind of haphazard even. So I'm more than open to learning different ways and better ways to incorporate that into my work. I do know, that one of the things back in late Empire Rome, the Eastern mysteries were banned for Roman citizens. They wanted Roman citizens to practice the traditional Roman cult. The Roman cult was very staid, and it was kind of boring even by pagan standards. And it was, the priest did everything. He stood there, the sacrifice, it was very straightforward. But Eastern mysteries had a reputation for being literally intoxicating. They were ecstatic. And there was a sense when a Roman citizen, which is why they're drawn to them, went into a temple, even a small one, with an Eastern god was being worshipped, there'd be clouds of incense and beautiful fabrics. There'd be jewels, and there could be nudity, there could be amazing drumming, there could be remarkable visions inspired, there'd be more ecstatic pronouncements. That you were more likely to have a visceral experience of the divine if you were engaging in an Eastern tradition. And the festivals and celebrations they would have would be clouds of incense smoke, and the chanting and the dancing and the self-mutilation sometimes, and the ecstasy of the myth. It was meant to transport, it was meant to wrench you out of the mundane and take you to a place in a headspace that was entirely beyond what you were used to. It's why they were, so attractive. And it's why the Latins feared them, because they seemed hard to control, and all that came with it. So, I have great respect for anything that fills the senses. And oftentimes, our rituals, I know for myself, they're kind of basic. It's me reading something, and you forget you have 5 senses at least. Where is the taste in this ritual? Where is the scent? Where is the beautiful sight? Where is the sound that's gorgeous? How can you enrich it through each of the senses to make it a tapestry of something that's beautiful and meaningful and transportive? We're all trying to sacralize our own lives, to sacralize the mundane through this work. So why, especially incense, which is relatively affordable, and so, a single whiff is so, it just changes the way you apprehend your space, and I love it. It's a great way to honor celestial and aerial powers. And I think we don't use it enough. I don't think we know how stingy we are with our materia. And sometimes you can glimpse it in older practices. There's that famous account by Benvenuto Cellini about attending a necromancer in Rome, going to the Colosseum at night to see him do a goetic invocation. And he talks about, they build a bonfire, and he talks about throwing, and he talks about these terrifying visions of ghosts they had, and demons they have all night. But one of the details is about throwing basically bales of herbs on the fire. And it doesn't take a lot of imagination to say, they were probably burning hemp. They were probably burning, other flowers and herbs that could have an entheogenic effect. I think their spiritual experience was real, but there were probably all night long clouds of this stuff coming off the fire that was fueling the vision and fueling the ecstasy of the rite. I tend to think I've done my job if I burn 1 cone of myrrh, and I feel like Gandalf. That I think sometimes it's worth remembering.
You got to grind it yourself, baby.
Right. Sometimes it's worth remembering, to ask ourselves, what if I did 10 times what I was doing? What would the effect then now? What if I did 20? Within the scope of not burning down my home or killing myself, I have to throw in as a disclaimer, things like datura are insanely dangerous and can cause death and blindness.
Right.
But that's not to say for every one like that, there's 200 incenses and oils that are safe. And where I have to remind myself, why aren't I pushing the limits of what I'm doing to create a deeper praxis? Because I know for myself, the danger is I become comfortable and I plateau and I get bored with my own praxis. And then I start to skip nights, and I start to, minimize the time doing it, because I've been there, I've done that. I know what to expect. I'm not sort of scaring myself anymore because I'm not pushing myself anymore. And I know I have to keep reminding myself, stop being basic and push it. And that's my challenge.
I love
Yeah, I
that.
love that. I love also this idea that you just touched on, Jack, of like fear is a part of the experience, I think,
Yeah.
of being an occult practitioner and being on this path. And I to take us way back to the beginning of the conversation, I worry sometimes that the more mainstream contemporary conversation steers us away from fear. We're so obsessed with this being safe and
Yeah.
creating this sort of like kind of neutered experience.
Yeah.
And we should be afraid. Some of this stuff is scary as shit. I think that's like the point, surely, you know?
So
Yeah.
in Mesopotamian philosophy, to be in the presence of a god was to be overcome. You could tell that a god or a spirit was near, or you were in their presence, because you were overcome with such a visceral sense of dread. Dread may not necessarily be the correct term, but it's such an incomprehensible state that you're in. And according to the texts, the presence of a god radiates with such splendor, such majesty. Demons also possess the same splendor and majesty. It's called Malam, M-E-L-A-M, and the human reaction to it is Ni. So it's described as a prickling of the flesh, which is essentially goosebumps. So think of all the times that you've been in ritual and you've suddenly have that overwhelming sense of dread, or you have the prickling of the flesh, or you feel like your heart's in your throat. I think in those situations, that's when you are in the presence of something otherworldly. I've had that experience more times than I can count. Even sometimes just doing a day-to-day devotional ritual of lighting incense and going about my day, sometimes I have to stop on my way out of my temple and go back and at least bow before the shrine before I can do anything, because there's that compulsion that I'm feeling this presence, so I need to do something to propitiate the being that is present in that space.
Yeah.
I'll add this too, because I think I agree with everything Sam said, and Celeste as well. I think if the work you're doing is purely archetypal, you won't know what we're talking about. If the work you're doing is just you think you're projecting your energy into the universe, you're not going to understand what we're talking about. And if you think it's simply, some sort of paradigm for self-help or some sort of expression of your own, artistic, metaphorical experience of the universe, it won't make sense. But if you buy into the spirit model of the universe, where that everything has a spirit, and if you call forth something, there's a good chance that it may actually make itself manifest to you. I think whatever you call comes, it comes every time. But that sense of that apprehension of what could be called the numinous, that prickling of the flesh, the prickling of the hair at the back of the neck, anyone who's done this sort of work knows that feeling and knows that it's what you yearn for and dread at the same time. There's a great description in one of C.S. Lewis's novels of someone who comes in the presence of an angel in the form of a pillar of fire, and he realizes that it's looking at him as much as a pillar of fire can look at someone, and he has two equal and immediate fears: one, that it will keep doing it, and two, that it will stop. And there's that sense, which I think a lot of us hunger for, that sense that we're in the room with something that we've called forth, has independent agency. And it, Robert Graves described it. He said the white goddess cannot be apprehended through our bodies recognize her because she's a bodily force. And that's that feeling. And even in Thai magic, when they're doing necromantic work in a graveyard, they say the spirit approaches from behind. And what they mean is wherever you're facing, whatever you're calling, it comes behind you. And you know exactly what they're talking about, because that's where the feeling arises, that stiffening of the hair at the back of the neck, and that sense that there's someone standing right behind you, so close that they could lay a hand on your shoulder. And some people even have that feeling once in a while of a touch at the back or a hand on the shoulder. John Dee describes it, and or a breath, and there's that sense of presence, which is really concrete sometimes, and sometimes bafflingly inconsistent. I might do what I consider to be a major rite and never experience it. I thought it was at the new moon rite. I was outdoors at a crossroads and I never had that feeling. And I tell myself, it doesn't matter. Your feelings are irrelevant to whether or not the rite worked. Fuck your feels. It doesn't matter. But I also know that sometimes I'll do something simple and my mind will be elsewhere thinking, I really have to, I got to take out the recycling by the time I'm done. And all of a sudden the hair will prickle almost painfully on my skin. And I wouldn't have been in the moment at all, but I'll know something's present. And I don't know why it came right then, but it's there, so what do you do? And, but I find that one of the most gratifying aspects of this work, and it scares me every time, but I'm always, whenever it happens, I know that I'm still in the game to some degree, which is a good reminder, that the game is not without stakes. And we do have to treat it seriously because certainly the beings we call forth do. And we can't start to think of them in a sloppy or casual way. There always has to be respect.
Amen.
God, speaking of amen, so it reminds me of my childhood growing up in Pentecostal church, where during praise and worship, if you weren't having some sort of emotional or visceral experience, oh, my battery's almost going, you were said to not be in the presence of the Holy Spirit, versus having one of those experiences where you're so emotionally moved that you start breaking down in tears. That's when you knew that the Spirit was with you, and that your experience was genuine. So I think about that a lot. That I feel like that has informed me to some degree when it comes to a more esoteric practice instead of a Christian practice. So it's an interesting point that Jack's brought up.
It's built into the chemical formula of solvate coagula, right? And it's clearly an important thing. It definitely is mishandled, I think, in most Pentecostal or charismatic worship services. But I mean, religion often is dabbling in realms that are actually well understood. We've just gone through this very long period of religious culture that has rejected, of course, its esoteric and mystical cores, unfortunately. So familiarity with that stuff, even in the Christian history, was much more understood in the past. I mean, in Judaism, it was always very well understood in Kabbalistic schools, the importance of ecstasy and ecstasy, the radical transformation that would come from worship that really was brought back by the charismatic movement in America in the last 150 years. So it's an interesting thing. We are ready to move into the end of our beautiful roundtable. It's been wonderful, but I guess before we do, Reverend Zemie is, I'm curious about the group. Like, maybe we'll wrap up by talking about a bit what we're all up to, since I know I'm interested, and if I'm interested in what all y'all are up to, then I'm sure everyone else is too, right? It's a healthy view of myself in the universe. Not solipsistic at all. But I'm curious about your views on ecstasy and ecstasy, like expression outwards, and both of them are models of mystical connection. One happens through leaving yourself, or the experience of feeling like you're leaving yourself, and one is the experience of radically going into yourself. In what you're setting up in the Church of Flesh and Feathers, do you have and even in your book, which I can't wait to get, I don't know if you have a copy there, but people need to see how beautiful your book is. But don't all go buy it at once, because I need a oh, right, we've got that sorted out. Last time I promoted a book, it's by Skinner, it's sold out, so I didn't get one, and I was like, wait, oh my god, what did I do? So do you have that much built into your practices? This is maybe a question for all three of you with your schools of magic. I'm curious about the emphasis on those kinds of what Samuel called Pentecostal breakdown of the self as a methodology in ritual.
Yeah, I definitely do. The ancient Egyptian praxis usually began at something called Zeptepi, which was the very beginning, the first sunrise. And the Neturist system that I am creating myself recreates that as well. So the very first, I guess, step in ritual workup in well, magic, is to sort of deeply contemplate the nature of your being. Begin to unravel long-held beliefs, begin to disassociate with people, just completely through meditation, remove all meaning from your life, and then allow yourself to basically sync up to music. So drumming is usually, or a sistrum I've got, usually helps with that as well. Get your body in sync to the little tiny universe you're making just in your own temple space. And then once that begins, start building into what I refer to as a fury. Start almost like inducing a panic attack almost. Find yourself in a state of chaos, because the very first moment is the beginning of ordering the universe. So in order to achieve your goal, you have to first present all of the pieces of that goal before you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, first is basically eliminate yourself so that you are not, you're not your job, you're not the clothes you wear, you're not the apartment you live in. You are just one with everything, so you're free to flow in and out of everything, and then start building what you want before you. Sometimes it could be a years-long process. Sometimes the result is almost instant. But yeah, and I don't know what people are going to think about this, but there was an ancient Egyptian practice, specifically in Hermopolis, wherein a large statue of Jehuty would have a pipe running through its mouth, through a wall, into a different room. And basically a priest would be in that other room, which, I mean, was small and typically, terrifying, dark, but working themselves into a state of ecstasy and then speaking a glossolalia. So basically speaking in tongues. Because so much of what I do centers around the written word specifically, but also the spoken word. A big part of what I do is removing meaning from words, that or breaking words apart into smaller parts and then reordering the way I ask things or say things. So basically, I'm saying speaking in tongues. Speaking into existence the order you want to see.
That was awesome, brother. That was awesome.
I'm hoping
Yeah.
to record a video of it happening sometime, because people, it's difficult to comprehend when you're just watching a video of the shrine and me doing it in the background.
Yeah, you do those on Facebook Live. People, that's something to let people know as we're doing our outro presentations of what we're up to for folks. You're doing.
Yeah, well, the Hika I only do a few times a month on Facebook Live, and I never post those. What I post to Facebook is the weekly. I'm in Shrine 3 times a day, so I broadcast one of them every week, just because I believe that devotion is necessary in what we do. And I know a lot of people have removed the religious component of the occult and esoteric. And I think truly that is having an effect on the world around us. We wield these powers with no respect for the powers that control those powers, I guess. That was a poorly worded sentence, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
We're taking advantage of the gods, basically, by not thanking them, by not giving them offerings, by accomplishing great things, and then saying that it was just our will and intention. I lost my train of thought.
Yeah. Yeah, the issue of cutting yourself off from source and personal and mystical connection just by playing thaumaturgically with natural forces and manipulating them. It's an interesting point. Actually, David Heimsmith got into it with me for a long time when I got to talk to him. A very interesting guy. I mean, I think that's why Golden Dawn temples are still all dedicated to usually an Egyptian god. So it's like, you know, where there's always these shrines and venerations. Like these pictures are from, this is not even at Temple Jehuty's shrines. These are from Temple of Isis down in LA. I think these are the only, don't know how many other photos there are of these left, but these were, you know, the Golden Dawn temples traditionally have these sort of altars and shrines of adoration, even as they are mainly training people to practice magic and initiating them to develop and grow. There's still this implicit and essential act of veneration of the divine itself that is I haven't noticed. I've been out of touch. Maybe I was playing Irish music for a few years here or there around the world, so I wasn't I came back to the occult and was like, whoa, a lot's happened since I was gone. And one of the things that's happened is this removal of the religious, almost a persecution of even the religious impetus from the occult. And I'm very fascinated by that, and fascinated by the people like all of yourselves who have such a focus and dedication to Hecate or Jehuty or or
All of
Pazuzu.
them.
Pazuzu. I have
1,500 plus gods.
I just got a cursed object from the set of The Exorcist, allegedly cursed by
man.
Pazuzu, who showed up on the set. It's in my bag over there, but nothing bad has happened yet so far. Maybe I'll
Yeah.
send it to you.
If it is cursed by Pazuzu, wasn't Pazuzu typically kind of a guardian of children
Well,
and
he's
expecting mothers?
yeah, he's the protector of children. He is an agent of the gods. So typically he was invoked or petitioned to drive away those demons, those spirits that would prey upon pregnant women, women in childbirth, infants. So anything that's the personification of crib death or infertility, you would ask Pazuzu to protect you from. So if you've got a cursed object,
I don't think
I'm
it was
curious to know more
it's a little
about that.
it's a little baby head. You'll love it. I'll show it to you hopefully
Ooh,
when we
cool.
do a podcast coming up. Yeah. Oh, it was a wonderful gift by this soror. I was like, do I really want to take this home with me? But then I was like, I'll wrap it in silk. Fuck it, it'll be fine. But I also don't think the set was famously haunted, right? It's a famous Hollywood story.
Absolutely.
But I don't actually think it would make even any sense for it to have been Pazuzu who was haunting the set, even though that was the icon they showed in the beginning of the film, because they were talking about the demon being Legion and all these other things. And it's not like they were trying to evoke any kind of spirit while filming it. So it was an unintentional haunting. It could have maybe, if anything, attracted to such a magnetic set as they were creating on where they were.
It's probably just like a really angry grip, like a really angry tech guy who was fucked over by the director, just came back to like piss on everything.
You don't know who's going to be a chaos magician.
It was an underpaid
saying.
union member.
Like that.
Yeah, dude.
Oh God, who knows? I could always send you the head and you can analyze it yourself. Just put it under your pillow and pray. It's a
Or
pretty cool
something.
thing. I'll show it to all y'all sometime. It's hauntings are interesting. That's a thing Celeste and I talk about a bunch. She's done 3 episodes of my podcast and many more to come, I'm sure. Many more. First time I talked to her, we actually talked about like Pizzagate and stuff. It was random, but I tend to that's the only rule on my podcast is transgression. I think there's something powerful about transgression. I'm a big fan of what philosophers have written, like Mircea Eliade, and the theology of spiritualizing as an act of transgression. The mercurial jump of Hermes is an act of transgression. And I think that is where spirit comes into play a lot of the time, is in those violations of liminal boundaries. But that's another subject for another time. Jack, do you want to give us what you're up to and tell us more about what you're doing these days and where people can find you? We're just sort of wrapping up and sharing what we're up to.
Well,
Unless you
thanks.
guys want to
Yeah.
just continue on
Well,
forever.
I appreciate the chance to shill and hawk my wares.
Oh, I'm all about that. I'm all about
I'm
that.
coming up with a course soon called God Song, which is going to be a year of Homer. And so we'll read over the course of 52 weeks. I'll be reading both the Iliad and the Odyssey and having discussions each week about the spiritual aspects of them, the apprehension of the divine, the epiphanies of the gods, the ways they pray and fight, and how they view destiny, and stuff like that. So I'll be coming out with that. It'll be a new course soon. And hopefully the books, the second edition of my book have been just reaching the US this week from Finland. So they'll be coming out. And I hope to do a class sometime not too far distant to go through some of the rituals of my book and do the journey of my book for people who are interested in that self-initiation system into the devotion of Hecate that I developed, for myself and for anyone interested in that kind of thing. So
Awesome.
that's the mischief I'm up to, and anyone who wants to
If
come along to that kind of nonsense
because
is welcome.
the current edition is sold out, correct? I mean, I think I tried to get it and couldn't.
Yeah, it's like a guy with an Italian restaurant that seats 15 people. He's like, my place, it only seat 15, but every night I'm sold out, So yeah, my place is my book is sold out, but they came up with a second edition, and now those will be out there as well. It's my publisher is XXR, and they're based in Finland, and so they'll be the books they publish will be hitting the States this month, I think. So it's exciting.
Awesome, man.
Yeah, I'm excited. I pre-ordered last year, so I'm chomping at the bit. I'm excited.
It was a while ago, didn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I owe you lunch. I have a standing offer. Anyone who bought my book, I'll buy you lunch. So, next time I'm in New Orleans.
I think we're coming to. I think we're coming to you,
UFOs.
buddy.
Yeah, exactly.
Three of you all a stone's throw from each other. I think once things open up, you're going to be a little inundated. So hopefully you do have a physical space where all the pilgrim occultists can come and worship.
Exactly.
And practice.
We'll take over the state capitol.
That is the plan, right? You all are so close to each other, which is remarkable for so many serious occults. Like here in British Columbia, like we got Chris Bennett, but then we got Frater Yeshi, but there's not a whole lot of other people. And for three of you to be in such a lesser populated area close together is a treat, because it means people, you guys could put on events and things, and a lot of people can come. Like I definitely I look forward to studying and learning from all of you.
Oh, what a nice thing to say. Yeah, people don't realize we all live within a mile of each other, so it's been extra.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we live within a mile of each other. The only other occultist I knew, Bill Duvendock, lived in St. Louis till he moved out to Poland to be with Asanath Mason. So I knew him. He was an hour and a half away, and then he went 3 hours north of us is Chicago, and of course you've got Michael Bertio and Jeff Cullen and our friends up there. So that's we have to go north if we want to hang out with anyone who's as weird as we are.
Yeah, well, I'll see you there, Celeste. We'll just set up.
Yeah, we'll go crash the party, look at some lights in the sky.
Yeah,
and make Jack bring us lunch.
We will.
I will. A good plan.
You think I won't, but I will.
And then Zemmi, you can bring all your people up to British Columbia when you're ready for that retreat, peyote retreat with we can all lick the toads and explore those. Rufus Opus just moved to Seattle, so that means he's like 2 hours away from where I'm sitting, basically, depending on traffic at the border. The only problem is we can't go across the border and back without going in, the Trudeau COVID jail and paying a fine and all that stuff. So, we are currently, as Canadians, owned by China, but hopefully some of our freedoms, not that we had many, will still persist, and we can keep interacting with you Americans who are very kind. Like I just spent 14 months in the States, and America was like, yep. I was like, anything I need to do that? And they were like what? And I was like, I don't know. They're like, just go. So, we've always people don't realize we've always had a very open border policy with each other, and that's one of those little blessings you don't hear about too much, but it's something that's definitely awesome, super awesome.
Yeah.
And I don't know much about what you're doing, Samuel, because I just heard your podcast today and looked at your sites, and your book is coming out. You want to tell people about your book coming out? Like, and hearing what Jack said about it was the best sales pitch, because I didn't realize, Jack, you said it very well, that it sounds awesome. I'm a super big fan. I've always been a bigger fan of the Assyrian and Akkadian things than even Egyptian. I know Damien Eccles is probably gonna like freak out over your work, because that's actually his main passion, as well as even replacing the LBRP archangels with the Syrian gods and stuff. So I think you might have a friend and maybe fellow devotee in Damien Eccles, in case you might have heard of him.
Cool. Well, I owe Jack a great deal of money for that endorsement, so I guess I'll have to sell an internal organ. Which one will get me the most money?
Hawk, tell them about your book, Sam.
Okay, so
I'm imagining which organ I could, maybe your pineal gland, I could grind
my
it
lungs
up,
probably
add it into some
no,
changa.
I need my pineal gland so I can levitate objects with my mind. So Rod and Ring, an initiation into a Mesopotamian mystery tradition, will be released sometime in June or July through Anathema Publishing. It is pretty much my attempt to codify my own praxis and harmonize the various elements that may not necessarily mesh well when it comes to Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian philosophy and religious praxis and interpretation. So I'm trying to realize that in a contemporary setting, while staying true to the spirit of the historical praxis. So while I am not a staunch Reconstructionist, I'm definitely someone who wants to contemporize these things, while also being true to not just the spirit of it, but also being true to the spiritual model and the devotional aspect when it comes to these gods and these spirits. So once that book is printed and in everyone's hot little hands, I'm actually currently working on another manuscript. This one is about the god Dumuzid, or Tammuz, and his historical worship, detractions that were written about by folks like Alexander Hislop, and essentially in the same vein as the Rod and Ring text, bringing his worship into a contemporary structure, contemporary system, while maintaining that devotional aspect, which, interestingly enough, he and Ishtar were actually worshipped well into the 18th century in rural parts of Turkey. So it's a form of worship. It's a religious praxis that's not lost to the distant past. So there are still elements within the last 200 years or so that we can look to. Lots of cool stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Celeste, what's up?
Hello. I don't have a book.
How you doing?
That's-
You don't got
once
no
once
book?
again, I put out into the universe, publishers, if you're listening. I did go to writing school. I do have a master's degree. Please, I'm available to talk about things. But no, I'm in a weird place in my personal practice. I would say, like, obviously, I make a lot of content online, and I do a lot of social media stuff, and that's sort of where my attention is focused now in an outward capacity. But I think, like, in personal practice, everything is in a huge place of expansion at the moment. So I'm sort of developing a personal system that's still it's still in the developmental stage, but I'm doing a lot of work with the concept of catabasis and descent, formulated around the idea of the cocoon. So I'm doing a lot of sort of metamorphosis work with butterflies and moths. It's very conceptual at this point, but I'm working on developing a system. And then I'm doing a lot of research and experimentation with marrying sort of paranormal research with the occult and ritual. So I'm doing, like, I got a hold of I got a hold of a spirit box, the SB7 spirit box, which essentially is just a radio that cycles through radio channels at a certain frequency. But there's a particular way of using the spirit box called the Estes method that was developed by Carl Pfeiffer and a couple other people doing research out of the Stanley Hotel. And you basically put headphones on in the box, and you have an operator and you have a receiver. So the operator's in the box with the headphones on, and the receiver is outside asking questions. And because you're listening to essentially just static in the box, if you do that in a ritual context, it's very, very easy to slip into a trance state, and it becomes sort of mediumship. And there's this sort of group of people, or different groups of people, who are developing this theory that this is a way to initiate contact with spirit or spirits or what have you. You got the person outside asking questions. You have the other person in the box listening to the static, going into a trance and saying whatever words it is that they can pick out of the static, but you can't hear the questions. And you get these transcripts that, in my experience using this over the past couple of months, it's quite uncanny. I did a session a couple of weeks ago now, probably about a month ago. And I was in the box, and we record all the sessions so you can listen back to them. And at one point, you are kind of saying gibberish. You're saying what the radio is picking up on. So it's advertisements and sports reports and all that kind of thing. But at some point in the recording, I said the word 7:30, and my partner, who was asking the questions, freaked out and pulled me out of the box. And he was like, "You said 7:30 at the 7 minute and 30 second mark on the recording, exactly as the recording hit 7 minutes and 30 seconds. You heard 7:30 in the box and you said it out loud." So, that's one example of a lot of very bananas shit that's happened to me in the past wee while. But that's a place that I'm going to in my personal practice and my research. So
it's such a fascinating intersection that I think we're only beginning to look at, is because you have all these paranormal people and all these occult practitioners out there, and they haven't actually generally intersected. I think that's because the idea of one seemed to discredit the idea of the other. But then there's disconnects that have led to this new area of crossover. There was this really cheesy thing where they put Joe Rogan in that room, and they were gauging his energy levels, and he went off the chart, and they're like, "What did you do?" And he's like, "Oh, I did a bunch of physical cardiovascular things, and focused and did all this." And they're like, "Yeah, it went off the chart." Why didn't they compare that to him not doing it? They didn't even bother to do it. It's like, what are you playing at here? I saw this thing once in a while. I watch something on Gaia I'm fascinated by crop circles, actually, but I saw this one thing with these globes of light that show up in photographs, and one guy said he can focus his consciousness outside of his head, and if you take the picture at the right time, they did it, it showed up as a ball of light. Well, if that is possible, it can be tested, and who better to test that than actual people who are sitting there meditating on a point in space almost every day for 30 years. They probably are the best bet to have that tested out, and if it can be replicated, that would be fascinating. So I think that crossover is just so
I think it's important, and I think it is happening more, which is great. I know that you talked recently to Marco Visconti, the Thelema guy.
Sorry, to whom?
Marco.
Oh yes,
Marco.
Yes.
Yeah, Marco Visconti. But he's got he's got a Patreon group of people, and he recently ran a spirit box Estes method experiment on his Patreon, for which I was one of the people in the box. I was one of the operators. And the idea of this was that there was a month-long ritual preparation involved. He had people who were going to be operators, he had people who were going to be amplifiers, and he had magicians doing all these different things, for a month-long, pretty rigorous practice. And the idea was that we were going to try and make contact with some ultra-terrestrials, specifically Lamb, from Crowley's writings. Wow. And I have to say that the way that session went down, some pretty weird shit definitely happened in that session. And actually, I was thinking about this earlier when y'all were talking, because that experience of dread and that visceral, bodily experience, that happened to me during that ritual practice inside the box. I had this sort of halfway point where I got nauseous and dizzy, and I felt like I was being pushed back out of my physical self, like I was in my brain, but suddenly my body and my brain were way bigger than they usually are, and I was getting shrunk down and pushed back. And I had never really experienced anything like that before. And it got to be so uncomfortable that I was almost going to pull myself out of the session, because I was like, this is terrifying, actually. But I pushed through it. So anyway, that's what I spend my time doing. It's fun. Yay.
We've gone quite a bit over the time I theoretically proposed. Is there's no rules. This is magic without fears, baby. We're just going with it. Yeah, but if there's anything anyone wants to end on, a favorite quote, a little last thing they forgot about what they're up to, where to find them, this is the time. I'll just, before we do that, I'll say what I'm up to. So I'm doing the podcast Magic Without Fears, of course. And you can go to magicwithoutfears.com to subscribe and get exclusive content, including me doing some rituals on the private members page, and then a bunch of episodes that are extra bonus ones or ad-free or whatever I feel like doing at the time. And that's great support. So thank you all for who are exclusive members. That really does help. It's just a couple bucks. But mainly I'm focusing on teaching on Hermetic Mystery School, hermeticmysteryschool.com. I'll give you guys a little bonus code for discount in the description below. If you want to check out any of my lessons, you viewers who have taken your couple hours to hang out with us, which is awesome. Thank you. My idea behind Hermetic Mystery School was What If Modern Magic by Don Craig, who is a good friend. And rest him and may he rest in peace. What if it was multimedia, which is what we're able to do now? I'm a child of the modern magic book from back in the day, and I thought, well, what if that could be multimedia? But of course, I also span the Yeats's Celtic mysteries, chaos magic, whatever I study, my love of Haitian voodoo and such, but mainly focused on traditional Golden Dawn techniques. And I'm always including updates from the different Golden Dawn orders that I get whispered to me about developments in technique and original documents and stuff like that. I'm a lover of all of those things and that whole stuff, but I'm definitely a sort of a psychedelic chaos druid at heart.
Thank you for inviting us. It was really wonderful. I appreciate
Yes,
it.
Yeah.
thank you so
My
much.
pleasure,
Yeah,
brother.
this was rad.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Jack, Zemmi, Samuel, Celeste, you guys are lovely. I could hang out with you all forever. The idea of this round table was to be less like at an academic conference and more at a magical tavern filled with mystical beings, and we're just in the corner over our stout and
Well,
whiskey.
cheers to that.
So there
Absolutely.
you go. Yeah, maybe next time we'll do this in real life, get Justin Sledge to show up and with his absinthe and do it right in person. I don't know.
There you go. There you go.
Zemmi, any chance you want to take us out with a little prayer, brother? If I'm not putting you on the spot, because I'm a devotee of the same God as you, and though when I was ordained at the Temple of Isis at Isis Oasis and Fellowship of Isis in Geyserville by 82-year-old Arissa Victor last year, I chose my patron goddess to be Inanna. So I've got that deeply within me as well, because I think she's just groovy.
She is.
Well, everybody
It's
loves
true.
Inanna.
Inanna,
So I've
Hecate,
heard.
Jehuty.
She's-
These are my
she's
homeboys
Corner,
and homegirls, my homies.
right?
Dude, all of you guys are so cool. I'm so stoked to be talking with all of you. It's great. We're super locked down here in Canada still. Like I can't go to a friend's house legally at all. And so it's really great to be able to do this stuff, and just thank you all sincerely.
No, thank you. This was really, really great.
So much fun. Yeah. I look forward to doing these every month. I've got guests lining up for the next ones. All of you can always come on my podcast anytime, do a future roundtable. I prefer regular guests over stranger dangers. So Jack, I really hope you and Samuel will do a epic little one-on-one with me on the podcast sometime soon, because I have many questions, just so many questions. Anyway.
Well,
I think I can be persuaded.
All
It
right.
won't take much.
Brother Zemmi,
Yes, sir.
if you got a few words for us, I'm game.
Oh yeah. Okay. Give me just a second. I've got a really hard time memorizing things these days, so I have to read it. but I got one. Okay.
That's very Tehutian as well.
Oh yeah,
The God of the written word, right?
it's very manic depressive.
That's a mood. Yep.
Okay. I give thanks to the Lord of the Midwest in all ways, at all times, for he is my breath, my voice, and all of that which sustains me. He is the greatest God, the truth speaker. He is the venerable ibis, great in Hika. He is the path and the strength of my limbs. He is the judge who weighs my heart against all that is and all that will continue to be. Jehuty is my song and my ear, and so I am his song and his ear. I go forth alongside him. Dua Theo Thi Thothu, the eternal king, Selah.
Thank you
Come
for that.
on, Shud.
Yeah, that's it. Beautiful. Thank you. Good
Yeah,
night,
thank you.
everybody.
That was amazing.
Tetelestai.
Good night.
Good night.
Take
Have a good
care.
night, everyone.
Bye.